Everybody, welcome to the Atypical Life YouTube channel. Josh here with Richard from CleverDickFilms, Dominic from Who Chaser, and Terry from TerryOnTuesday. And
Hello.
I am here today. Yes, I was thinking, is that your channel name? Is that your... That's the name of the show you produce, isn't it, sometimes?
Kind of, yeah. That's all I'm known for at the moment, but there are big things on the way.
Check it out in the description below, guys, absolutely. Today, I've brought you all together because it's been a very slow news week in regards to Doctor Who. I think you'll all agree. Nothing much has really gone on, except, I don't know, certain someone's come back to the show. So I'd love to get overall your thoughts about the appointment of Russell T Davies and all that's come with it. But first and foremost...
Who?
Some Welsh bloke, I think he wrote a book or two about 20 years ago.
That was me. Oh, no, hang on. I'm the other Welsh bloke who wrote a book 10 years ago. All right.
Oh. But yes, going back to a couple of months ago, obviously we found out that Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall were leaving the show in 2022, which I felt was a little bit out of nowhere. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but they'd just done Comic-Con and they made no mention of leaving. And then about a week or two later, they just dumped that they are leaving the show. I'd love to know what you guys think, firstly, about the timing of it, but also how do you feel about these two stalwarts of the show leaving at the same time?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised in both cases to some extent, whether it wasn't... I mean, Chibnall and his production team have been very good at keeping a lot of spoilers under wraps, I think, probably far more proactively than the previous era. But I wouldn't be surprised if, these big shifts and changes eventually are going to leak. And I wouldn't be surprised, as I say, that the reveal that Russell T Davies, for example, was going to be coming back as showrunner was probably put out because they knew someone was going to leak it soon or something, because it did seem out of the blue, as you say.
Yeah.
I was surprised at the news that Chris Chibnall would be moving on, considering the timing and the run-up, the anniversary and things like that. I wasn't so surprised that Jodie Whittaker was choosing to sort of throw in the towel, because I think when you think about the usual duration it seems to have become for doctors in the role now, that's about right. I was disappointed a little bit because I thought, always before a final, we've only had 2 series with her. Of course, we'll have a third one by the time she comes to leave, and I'm sure it will, round off the time. But you kind of feel like there's things you still want to see of that. And yeah, obviously it's exciting and interesting to see how they will handle that transition from, going into an anniversary year with a new doctor is not something that's ever really been done before. We've always had some incumbent who's established in some way or another. So yeah, I was surprised, but not shocked as such, because you kind of get used to these sort of developments going on, I think, as it goes forward.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I was surprised when I heard about it, because I was not necessarily surprised like Richard about Jodie leaving, but I was more surprised about Chibnall leaving so soon, because at least, nowadays we used to showrunners having at least 2 doctors under their belt before they head off. I mean, you could make an argument that Chibnall technically has 2 doctors, but I'm thinking more in the vein of full-time doctors, multi-series doctors. So it's an odd one, because I generally thought that it was going to use the show a bit more, explore a bit more, maybe stay on a couple more years. But I guess leaving at the same time as Jodie, it did reinforce what he said about them having a free and done pact or something like that in the little news report, and which I find quite peculiar anyway, because that is a very in Doctor Who parlance, is a very quick run.
Yeah.
Especially with the reduced episode count as well. But I guess with the production time taking longer because of COVID, then it kind of balances out in terms from a production perspective, as opposed to what's being put out on screen. But yes, it is, in terms of how they released it, I was fully expecting that to be the sort of thing that would have been perfect to announce at the panel. and yet it came so soon after, which does make me wonder whether they were just deciding whether to say to the panel or not, and decided eventually against it. Because saying it at the panel would have been a pretty cool publicity move in general, just saying this is our last series, we're going out with a bang. But instead just leaving it until a week later on a Twitter post.
Well, I think, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, if it was going to be a big event like that, they, you know, it is a big event, so they would have made it some way, twist it into the PR or the publicity of it, which makes me think that these negotiations are something that's only just been really finalised as such. Perhaps when they did that, I think probably Jodie Whittaker had probably decided to move on. But maybe the BBC was sort of saying, well, we want to keep this going, but there's developments in the background. A little bit like how Moffat had to stay on in a way for a year to get ready for Chibnall to join. I think it might have been that they didn't want to say anything for certain, because being someone who's dedicated to the show and loves the show, a bit like John Nathan Turner, I suppose, back in the day, he didn't want to kind of release the reins until he was sure that there was someone there lined up to take over. So because it seems it's quite a coup, really, I suppose, and I think it's reflective. This development such is, it's not just a question of you know, in the past where you've had a new BBC employee essentially take over. This is, I think, indicative of how the BBC is developing as an organisation, just because of the different realities, things like streaming, television, competition, the fact that the BBC as an organisation, as we have known it, is kind of slowly being eroded. So this move to kind of almost make it like a co-production with Bad Wolf, I am, you know, from that, it's almost like outsourcing it slightly, I think.
Yeah.
I think sorry, Richard. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
No, I think the timing of these announcements could have been a lot better, because it just seemed like you say, it for whatever the reason was, it was kind of dumped out on Twitter rather than made a big thing of. So again, it may have been, like you said, that a case of maybe there was you know, a reason to get it out before it got leaked, etc. But the timing to announce Russell, I think, was too soon as well. I think they should have at least, you know, because the people who are not fond of Jodie Whittaker and Chibnall now are kind of overdoing it online, crazy, going, oh, I can't wait till it's 2023 and let's get that out of the way, and they're not giving Jodie a fair enough run, you know. So when she's supposed to be on Graham Norton at some point, they're going to be asking her about Russell T Davies, when they should be asking her about your final series and what's it like, and how's the whole run been, and bring a bit more credence to what's happening for her right now, rather than things. So the timing, like you say, was a bit wonky. That we'll probably never know the actual reason why this was sent out, but I think it could have been done better. And I although I applaud the completely unexpected bomb of Russell T Davies Bad Wolf coming back, it was very weird. It was I think it could have been held on a little bit longer, maybe halfway through the series or something.
Yeah, it would have made sense, wouldn't it? But then even so, I mean, when you remember how Moffat was announced as the new showrunner during the series 4 of David Tennant, and
that's right,
Tennant announcing at the National Television Awards that he wouldn't be coming back, there was still, like you say, we knew it was coming. We knew Moffat was taking over. We didn't at that point know who the new Doctor was. But then even when we did, we knew that Matt Smith was going to be the new Doctor. There was still a big publicity about the new era and about the end of the era, about the specials, about the end of time. And, you know, David Tennant was on all the idents. I know that was a different era in the sense of its popularity with the general audience, and perhaps how much money the BBC actually had to spend to promote it. But there's been a lot of radio silence, hasn't there, about the new series. And I can only guess from snippets of things about why that might be. I definitely get the impression, and this kind of links with some implications that Chris Chibnall made in his recent column he wrote in Doctor Who magazine about how the way that the program is made now is different and has actually become different since he took over, in the sense of how much I'm trying to think of the word, autonomy he has perhaps as the showrunner. I don't think, for one reason or another, he's had the same control over the show as perhaps his predecessors enjoyed. Definitely Russell T Davies, who very much kind of took the John Nathan Turner formula and ran with it and did it arguably better, of being a face, you know. I mean, I don't blame Chris Chibnall for not appearing on everything and talking about the show, because the online discourse these days is so vociferous and disgusting, frankly, that I don't blame him. But you know, you saw Russell T, even if you weren't a fan like us watching Confidential and stuff, everyone knew who Russell T Davies were. He was almost as much of a star as David Tennant, as the lead of the show was. It was that group, and you haven't had that with the Chris Chibnall era.
That's definitely
and
something.
So I don't think he's got.
Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think that he has much input in how the show is promoted. But that's very much a guess on my part, because it's just that there's not that, it's not out in the zeitgeist so much, so people don't know when to expect it. And I wouldn't be surprised actually if this series isn't shown as like an event, like 6-day event. I wouldn't be. I have no basis for that, but just because of the timing and the need to actually do some promotion, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. And the fact that it's this connected story and stuff, and you see how a lot of sort of big shows make this kind of impact now. If they want that kind of water cooler interaction, they tend to put them on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the finale is on the Friday kind of thing. I really wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't like the last week in October or something like that.
Yeah, it's getting a bit close to the nail now in terms of publicity, because I mean, there have been several purported release dates that people have just been shifting the goalposts for quite some time. Like, I've heard people saying it's starting on Halloween. Well, we've reached October, no one's breathed a word, so you can probably assume that that's not happening. Early November, I'd say, is probably more realistic. I mean, either way, it's going to be, it's a 6-week one, and it's probably going to have a New Year's special. So at the latest, that would be like mid-November, I'd say. So there's still time, but it's just, I think what's getting a lot of people at the moment is the lack of knowledge. I know a lot of people on Twitter are just basically like, we know nothing, we want to know, tell us. When realistically, it probably isn't as easy as that. As you're saying, Richard, I don't think Chibnall probably has that much power over the publicity. And I mean, they're always allocated the budget. Yeah, schedulings.
I mean, even back in the day, I remember Russell T Davies getting greatly frustrated about how the BBC kept changing the time slot. I mean, they've always played sort of yo-yo with the time slot and quite fast and loose, which I think has been to the detriment of the show. But even at the height of its popularity, they'd knock it back a few hours or put it on way too early or something like that.
Yes, I recall during Series 8, half the series was done at its normal time, then half the rest of the latter half of the series was like after 8 o'clock something. And that was a real detriment to ratings. So it's been, people always saying Doctor Who should be on later. I don't feel that. I think it should be as in tea time or whatever, early evening is that sort of perfect time slot for it. 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Like the Russell T Davies series, primarily around the 7 o'clock range, but again, they did shift it about a lot. But it was consistent for the most part, and that's the sort of thing that has been lacking. Really, it's just that scheduling consistency, which again isn't really a fault of the show itself. It's just more of how the BBC schedule aligns, because having to balance it out with Strictly and all those reality and dancey shows. It's a tricky one. It is a tricky one. But back more on topic, it's more with the whole departure and the oncoming Series 13, I do feel that it has been perhaps maybe overshadowed a little bit. Because again, as Richard was saying, and Terry as well. It's a lot of people are very excited for the Series 14, but it does feel like Series 13 has been kind of forgotten about by a lot of people. And I think that's a bit sad, really. I mean, every era deserves their time in the spotlight if they're going to depart. And this is a very unique case because in terms of the oncoming showrunner, I mean, the publicity rise, it's a returnee as opposed to a new one. It's someone who's proven themselves as opposed to someone who's yet to prove themselves. And I think that's a circumstance that is almost unheard of in this present circumstance.
Oh, yeah.
So it's immediately gotten so much hype because people immediately think they have an idea of what they're going to expect, and this perceived nature of the show being brought back to past glory or whatever. And I think that is it's an attitude that should be not executed well, not taken lightly, really, because people tend to take it for granted. But what people do forget to consider is that the remainder of the Chibnall era could well be great. We don't know what we've got lined up. And we've just got to hang in there and enjoy the Doctor Who that we've got instead of just waiting until being like, hey, Doctor Who comes back in 2023. Like, no, don't do that. That's not me. That is mean. That's not cool. Yeah.
I think that's the thing, though, I find a bit frustrating. And this goes back to what you were saying, Terry, is that when you don't have this publicity, and then you have this bomb of Russell T Davies coming back, and then there's nothing to follow up with. It does seem, I don't know the truth of it, but it does seem almost like the BBC is almost like saying, right, we're washing our hands of what's left of this era and getting excited about the next one. It's almost like when a film, obviously when a film is released, you have to factor in, they say roughly the same amount they spent on the film for the marketing. And if they feel when they've got it in the can that the film's not going to do well, they're not going to spend that amount of money on the marketing. So they just put it out and no one sees it and they just sort of burn it off in that way. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think we should take it as an indication of the actual quality of what's upcoming. But you can't help but feel that. And so you feel frustrated because I don't think it will be like that based on what's come so far. And it makes me frustrated that people will take it and twist it into that. And it doesn't matter what I say. I want the BBC to say something. Say, no, we are proud of this kind of thing. Look at this. And there's more to come. And
well, for me, I'd feel like it would have been opportunistic to release a trailer for the new series probably a few days after the Russell announcement, maybe a week later, just whilst the world is talking about Doctor Who. I think it would be very advantageous to go, oh yeah, guys, we've got something coming out soon. But they just didn't take that chance, and it really confuses me.
I would have said I would have released a trailer before the news, personally, if it were me in charge of the scheduling, because I feel like, yes, the Russell T Davies news did get people talking about Doctor Who, but it got people talking about past Doctor Who. It's not necessarily going to make people interested in the new Doctor Who. I would say if you released a trailer for the new Doctor Who and then announced Russell T Davies, it retroactively gets people interested in the new Doctor Who because they're like, oh, wait, this, especially if it's a really cool trailer, be like, oh, okay, okay, I might tune into this, there's going to be a lead in. So it's, because again, it's that feeling that some people just now consider Series 13 to be that thing that people are, thing that's going to happen while we wait for Russell T Davies to come back.
Yes, generally, the promotion for this series, I just feel like it's going to reflect badly on the ratings, not just because of the promotion, but because of the announcement that's already been made about Russell. I feel like people will forget about this series very quickly. I really do.
There's there seems to be. Russell's very aware of this. His one of his major quotes on the BBC site, and I'm reading from it here, is that he's making a big point of saying, guys, calm down. Although we had to announce this thing, there's still a whole, I quote, there's a whole series of Jodie Whittaker's brilliant Doctor Who for me to enjoy with my friend and hero Chris Chibnall at the helm. I'm still a viewer for now. So he it sounds that kind of sounds like, obviously he's giving Chris and Jodie their due and their respect and everything, but it feels to me like this came out without, you know, kind of his say so in a way. It's almost like we've got to get this out. So they ask him for a statement, you know, in a press release, and he says, "Oh well, you know, what do you think, Russell?" And he's like, oh, calm down, everyone. Don't let my appointment overshadow everyone else."
I think that's evidence, isn't it? He's always been very, very savvy with how to promote, I think, all his programs, all his shows.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what lends credence, I think, to the idea that I think it was something that the BBC announced without, and there's certainly precedent of them announcing things without consulting anyone. I mean, just think of Christopher Eccleston, a lot of the bad blood there.
Oh my!
Where they just said why he was leaving without really checking, and then they had to apologise to him, and it made it even messier than it needed to be. Because someone off the cuff said, "Oh no, he's leaving because he doesn't want to be typecast," and that wasn't necessarily the statement that he wanted to make. So, I think again, this kind of, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs of how the new production will work, but it seems to me very much like Doctor Who is now becoming a show that will be whereas before perhaps we viewed it as the BBC making it with the support and financial assistance of other production companies. It seems very much now that it's going to be made by Bad Wolf Productions with the BBC's support, if you see what I mean. And so there's a slightly different, and that's why it's reassuring, and obviously for the BBC as well, to get Russell T Davies to do it, because we know that he's a safe pair of hands, at least in the sense of his respect for the show and the law. But it's exciting for me because although I've said a few times before when people have spoken to me, although I love all of Doctor Who, the Russell T Davies era is not necessarily my favourite of all the eras for different reasons. But unlike a lot of these people who are saying this, I will go back, press the reset button back to when it was good kind of idea. I don't see it that way because I think that, for one thing, that's a bit insulting to Russell T Davies because it assumes that he hasn't developed as a writer in the last 10 years, and that he won't have new things to say, and that he won't build on what I imagine he undoubtedly sees as the successors of the Moffat era and the Chibnall era. Someone was asking me about this the other day and saying what would I hope to see from his new era, and I said, well, one of the things that I really hope is that he continues to build on the approach that Moffat started to do, but Chibnall very much sort of ushered in, which was to kind of diversify the team behind the cameras, the writing team, and it's this idea. People have short memories, and perhaps when they have watched things as children, they didn't pick up on subtext. But this idea that Doctor Who will suddenly go back to not being woke anymore, this kind of idea, I think they're kind of not really paid attention to Russell T Davies's writing career. I mean, there is an argument to say that perhaps it'll be more subtle under Russell T Davies, although I don't necessarily. I think if Russell T Davies wants to make a point, he'll make a point. He's not going to cover it in layers of subtext. He's always been upfront about what the point is. He has. He's a. I wouldn't say that he's a polemicist as such, but he always has an agenda in his writing, as all good writers tend to do. And his agendas now will be similar but different from what they were 10, 15 years ago. And so he'll take new things. He won't want, as a writer, to just repeat things he's done before.
Exactly.
And cover the same old ground.
Yeah. I just find it funny how people are always like, is going to de-roke the show. It is absolutely ludicrous, because I remember back in those times when I used to peruse forums back in 2008, 2009, people would frequently accuse him of having a gay agenda. And it's laughable that people have now forgotten all that and have just been like, I mean, things in the RTD era, people tend to forget the sort of things that Chibnall and to a probably lesser extent Moffat will be crucified for now. I mean, he introduced Martha, first Black companion, had Mickey as well before that as the companion's boyfriend, introducing Captain Jack to the show, omnisexual companion, I believe. And all sorts of things. Had the lesbians in Gridlock as well.
Yes.
I don't really believe that this is all suddenly going to go away during Russell. He's not going to do less than he did in actual original
I was talking
era.
to someone about this. I'm going to give them the credit because they came up with it, and it's a great quote. Sean Russell from Candy Jar. I was talking to him about it, and he said, what people seem to forget, and this is exactly what you're saying, Dominic, is that Russell T Davies is a very progressive writer and thinker, and he brought all this stuff in. And for people to think it's all going to go back to sort of running down corridors, being chased by Daleks, and that's the end of that. Russell has grown so much as a writer. You've seen it in Years and Years, and It's a Sin. And he's going to add even more of what, I mean, if that's what he does, then that's why they bring him on board. They go, give us more of this. Yes, we know what your skill set is. Give us a Doctor Who. It's going to change, but what I like about it is that Russell does have this, obviously, like all of us, a long-term fans' respect for the show, and he knows in which ways to improve it and which ways to not touch it. We won't damage it. He was quoted once as saying the TARDIS will always be a police box. It's like good,
he knows those essential elements that make it work, doesn't he?
Absolutely, and there's certain things that are sacred and do not touch them, but he is a progressive writer. And if some people are saying, we've had thank goodness there's not going to be any more of this woke stuff. No, hold on to your seats, because Russell, like you said, Richard, he will make a point, and he won't be subtle about it, but he's pushing the boundaries. And I firmly believe that his writing of the opening quote on every Torchwood episode was the 21st century, the future's coming and you got to be ready. What was the bit before that I badly
everything changes.
21st century is when it all changes and you've got to be ready. And that's not about aliens and monsters. That's about the way we watch TV, the way society is changing and stuff. And unfortunately, we're living in a society right now where look at what's happening with the Jodie announcement and the Russell announcement. It's a case of like, if the BBC don't tell anybody anything, everyone gets their knickers in a twist and like, we need a date, we need a trailer, we need this, we need that. And then if they do tell them everything, they're like, where's the secrecy? I wish they wouldn't spoil it all for us.
It's true. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't sometimes.
Cake and eat it.
I think the problem is, of course, as you say, you mentioned there about the time in which we live in now and how we can compare that to even 10 years ago, I'd say, not 5 years. I think probably the last 5 years is this sort of era we'll look back on, hopefully, at some point and see it as distinct, because we're always encouraged, aren't we, to take one side or the other. Everything's very, very polarized, and that goes for everything, even down to what color is this dress? Do you know what I mean? It's like you've got to take one side or the other, and there's no dissent. There can't be any centrist position. And sometimes
Team Cap or Team Tony. It's like, why?
Exactly. And sometimes, I mean, saying that, I do think that sometimes in the effort to be unbiased and balanced can sometimes amplify voices far louder than perhaps they actually are in society. But that idea of having, it just comes down to civil discussion about something. It is something that appears, at least sometimes, to be unfashionable at the moment, doesn't it? And so that is going to, I wouldn't want to be whoever it is that the BBC employs to be like the Doctor Who Facebook poster. I've stopped bothering reading the comments on that because it's like putting out a piece of cheese or something for mice. They just all flock, and if you only read that, you get a very skewed view, I think, of what the actual public think about something.
Very, very reactionary fan base. The minute you look at people like Balstrike, you look at who's going to have a field day with this era, by the way, if you thought it was woke before.
Roddick.
Do people still watch that?
Apparently. But no, I think what people don't understand, I think what you said is right there. It's a bit insulting to think that Russell is going to make the same show he did 10 years ago, because for the past 10 years, he's got better and better and better and has become a much more cultured writer. He went away to America for a few years. He came back. He made people care about Channel 4 in a way I haven't seen people do in a very long time. So that was wonderful. He's a king of promotion. He's a king of marketing. He's a king of having his agenda. But if you really have a problem with it, you forget about it because of how good the show is, if that makes sense. I think both these same people will be eating out of the palm of his hand by the end of this.
Oh, I have to say, his promotion for It's the Sin was legendary. In terms of the way he handled it with Channel 4, they had a whole day when there was premiere day, and they used all like loads of old idents and old like presentation styles.
Yeah.
And they brought that all back from whatever year that It's a Sin was set in, and reflecting how Channel 4 was back in the day. I thought that was an absolutely genius move.
Ooh.
And for him to be able to like have that power in a sense to be able to exert that and get that done, it definitely it's that. Like, yeah.
Sorry, it's just what you're saying there is that he has this kind of infectious enthusiasm and self-confidence that I think other executives sort of trust him to be out in the front kind of thing. And what I found particularly enlightening reading The Writer's Tale, I don't know if any of you have read that, but I definitely recommend it. It was the essentially the email exchange for several years between himself and Ben Cook from Doctor Who magazine. And from the point of view of it ticks many boxes in the sense of kind of biographical memoir, a kind of a guide, an instruction manual, but also just an insight into him as a person. What I was most enlightened by is how angst-ridden, at least he was then, and how self-critical he was for someone who comes across as so confident. But what I think is particularly great about him, that goes with what you were saying there, Dom, is that he is someone who film and television and that kind of art is always a balance, or at least a conflict between the artistic the value of art in itself and expression, and the monetary, budgetary, product capitalist side of it.
Yeah,
and
the
of course
showmanship as well as the creative, isn't it?
And he embodies that very successfully because he knows how to do the spin. He knows how to promote it. But he also knows, he has a healthy sense of knowing that is somewhat a load of nonsense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, he won't go too far.
He recognises the guff for what it is, and he can walk the walk, because when you then look at his presentation he did, I can't remember what it was for. I think he won an award by a magazine, gave him an award or something. It was about a year ago, I think. And he did a presentation about the BBC and how, as an institution, how important it was, and how the ideas that it was founded under are under threat, which goes to show that although he's a fantastic businessman, if you want, in the sense of how he can market things, he also has the values of what a democratic sort of socialist free press is actually all about.
He's a bit of
Sorry,
a
I just went off on a bit of a tangent.
No, I think that's great.
Felt quite strongly about that.
I think him and Moffat both had that in them, though. You'd see, especially when he was in charge of the show, Moffat would consistently defend the BBC. And I think that is an important aspect of why they seem to like these writers so much. But something I'm very interested about with Russell coming back is, obviously we've talked about he's been away for 10 years. Do you have any idea how many contacts he has now in terms of writers, in terms of the hottest stars in Britain and all these sorts of things? I mean, he could pick,
and even the ones he doesn't know will want to work with him because the kudos and just the personal opportunity,
100%.
It's almost unlimited at this point. He is one of the most prolific, well-connected writers in this country, of this country's talent. Well, I mean, in terms of United Kingdom as a whole, is almost extraordinary. It's almost scary how much influence that he has. and that can only be a good thing for the future of the show.
Exactly. I'm thinking beyond actors as well. So we're probably talking writers' rooms getting in more talent in terms of directors. Obviously, Julie Gardner's coming back. So on the producing side, maybe even in the music side. I mean, Sagan's been fantastic, I think, during Jodie's era. I don't think he's had nearly enough credit for producing the music he has.
No, I definitely agree with that. It's very underrated. And a lot of the time people overlook things, I think, because they don't understand about mixing.
Yeah,
how music is mixed into a program. Murray Gold, certainly in the Eccleston Tennant era, was very much forefront. I mean, sometimes when I rewatch those episodes, I must admit, I get a little bit frustrated because I'm like, I can't hear the dialogue because the music is just too loud. And I've got a surround sound system, so it's not just my telly. And second, the way that they've mixed his music in is very much more understated, as one school of thought towards music in television and film would say you should do. But if you listen to his scores, I think they're very
Murray
very
Gold
good.
has a really good ear for themes. You know, he's written themes for almost every character, hasn't he? So it is tempting then if you're editing an episode and you've got this sort of library of characters' themes to throw them on top. And a bit like one of my favorite Star Wars films is Rogue One, but I can't think of a scene that doesn't have music blaring over the top. It's like, goodness me, can you let them talk for a bit? You know, and don't get me wrong, love Murray Gold's music, but I like that Segan's music is a little bit more understated. And somebody said on Twitter the other day, I think it was Rassilon Productions, they said best Cybermen theme ever, and I'm like, really? So I had to go back and listen to it, and it is really, really good. But again, at the time of watching the episode, it was probably done in a way that it didn't overshadow, you know, the rest of the visual aspects.
And it goes with the aesthetic generally of the show now, where it is, when you think about like The Woman Who Fell to Earth and things like that, there's, as you say, it's quite understated, but he composes music which suits the tone of the story. You look at something like Spyfall, and suddenly there you've got your James Bond bombastic. I mean, that's a very distinctive score. You know, when they first go to the
you can turn that on. You know, you can turn on the outlandish music as well as the background stuff, I suppose you could say.
But that's the thing, is the thing I prefer actually about Murray Gold, and it's something that I'm going to talk about when I do my Matt Smith era video, because that's where I thought I'd choose to focus on him, is because when it went into the Moffat era, I suddenly really started appreciating his music, like his score. I mean, they were still quite loud and bombastic in some respects, but I liked personally the kind of fairy tale aesthetic and style and tone that came in with Moffat, and Murray Gold got that and reflected it. So I hope, I mean, it all depends, doesn't it? A good composer is going to compose music which reflects what the writer and the director is going for in that particular scene. So it all comes down to how Russell T Davies writes those scenes and how they're directed. I do hope that they're, and I mean, visually you've got a very different look to the show now, and how it was even 15 years ago, you know, not just in the sense of the technical advancements, but just I mean, one of the things that was particularly striking once again when I was rewatching Doctor Who in order, so I didn't have to wait a year, I jumped straight from the end of Capaldi to the start of Whittaker, was that big lens aspect ratio type change to it, and it's really, really noticeable as a change in the aesthetic. So, you know, maybe I don't know. I mean, it doesn't strike me, although he is involved heavily in a lot of his projects, it doesn't strike me that Russell T Davies is necessarily as technically minded as to the visuals and things. But I think that there's more opportunities and maybe more money now to play with different ways of presenting it. So it'd be interesting to see whether he continues that style, or, you know, but we're not going to go back to the same kind of cinematography and things that we had. So again, the show will feel different. And again, it'll be interesting to have, I doubt Murray Gold will come back, because I mean, that was a hell of a run he had as composer. I mean, that was what, at least,
was it 15 years?
Yeah, it must have. No, it was
2005 until 2017, so 12 years.
12
There you
years.
go. 12. I mean, that's a long time
Yeah,
to be doing
yeah,
job.
long
I
time
doubt
for any
he will
one
want
job.
to come back necessarily.
No, it's only
I
been
don't
like
know.
a few years
Well,
since he left.
exactly, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see Russell T Davies Doctor Who with different music, because I think a lot of the time, and sound is something that is a particular kind of interest of mine when it comes to filmmaking and things, sound and music.
Yeah.
Because they are subtle, subconscious things a lot of the time, we don't realize sometimes how much of an impact they have on the way we receive a program or a film and how we appreciate them. So it'll be interesting to see that very different style, perhaps.
Well,
Yeah.
for me, this last couple of weeks has been really kind of underlining that whole sound versus dialogue battle that goes on, because I'm finishing off my first feature film, and the score that we've got for it is quite empty. It's quite bleak. There's just like straight strings and things, and that was done purposely because the film is very dialogue heavy, and you can't have these bombastic themes over the top when two people are having a conversation. So when you listen to the score on its own, it's a bit like, oh, this is a bit empty, but it was never meant to be listened on its own. You know, it's stuff over the top. But the quality thing is another issue. I might put the cat among the pigeons here, but I've felt that the two Jodie Whittaker seasons looked cheap, and I'm a bit of a production designer myself, and it didn't feel like they spent a lot of money on it. And to kind of underline that, a friend of mine was approached a couple of months ago by the BBC to build a TARDIS for Jodie for 1,500 quid.
Oh.
That's all they had. And it's absolutely true. He showed me the plans and everything. They went to him. He doesn't work for the BBC. He's a prop builder. You know, he's sort of in. He's very close to the border of England and Wales. But he's like, yeah. They said, can you make us a collapsible TARDIS in fiberglass or wood or whatever for 1,500 quid?
This is the exterior, right?
Yeah, and I was like, you couldn't get one off. You know, if someone asked me to build one, I couldn't build one for 1,500 quid. It's like,
No.
I've got most of a TARDIS downstairs in my living room, and we're coming up to about 700 quid in wood alone.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, like, was the money running out? Or have they got like a reduced budget or something? But then,
well, I think that's a big part of it, isn't it? I mean, you look at how
when you look at Bad Wolf stuff, I mean, the productions they've done so far, it looks like they may be able to rope in more money from elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's not just the BBC funded thing. It'll be all these production companies. And you look at his Dark Materials and the other things that they've been doing, they're very cinematic and they're very huge. And I think this can only be a good thing.
Yes.
Because the word cinematic is a word I always use when I describe, when someone says, oh, what was it like for David Tennant's era? It's like every episode felt like a movie.
Yeah.
It felt really big and really rich, and not sort of, you know, going back to wobbly sets or whatever they say. But you know, I'm looking forward to this quantum leap in production design and quality.
I agree. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is the BBC has always been under the cosh in that sense, and probably no more so than in the last few years, you know, the last 5-6 years or so, in the sense of, you know, freezing license fee and all that. And without all any kind of debate or which side you come down on to that, the simple fact is that the way that they are funded is on the way out.
Yeah.
And they're having to adapt. And I think that the choice to employ Russell T Davies and to get Bad Wolf involved and to outsource it in some way is actually a testament to how valuable and how much the BBC actually value Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because I think this was probably the only way it could have continued, which is why it's been a little bit up in the air as to what's happening for the last few months. I don't think it's because they want to keep their cards close to the chest. I think they didn't know until very recently exactly what was going to happen. And then they only told us because there was no way they would have been able to keep it under wraps for too long. So they wanted to try and take ownership over it. But yeah, I mean, I think maybe there's an argument to make for certain decisions from the production point of view that didn't help that situation. I think having 4 leads is obviously going to reduce the number. I mean, we all know this, Dom, from Big Finish. You can only have a certain amount of actors per production, which is obviously going to limit the kinds of stories that you can tell because of how much you have to pay actors and how many people you can have, as far as I understand.
Yeah, I mean, but you've got to be careful not to eat up your budget through the casting.
Yeah.
And I believe, I mean, I didn't.
Well, because every cast member is, you're going to have makeup, costume for that character, everything, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I didn't think of this particular point until I really started working on the nitty-gritty and everything in regards to the current TV run. But yeah, having 4 companions definitely would eat it. I mean, it's already eaten in on a characterization level as well, I would say, screen time level.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a case where it's something that has to be taken with a lot of care. I mean, you could make the same argument to how they handled it with the 5th Doctor.
Completely.
Yeah.
But the benefit of that is that they had more time for each story.
Yes.
So it's an interesting one, really. And I would say in terms of production, though, for the next era, I think his Dark Materials and It's a Sin Years and Years are definitely going to be the focus, going to be the points that we can look at, for example, of how this is going to be, because we've got an example of what Bad Wolf likes to put out, and B, we've got an example of what Russell Davies himself likes to put out. So it'll be a happy medium of the both. Because we'll be using those sorts of lighting and things that you see on It's a Sin and Years, combined with the cinematography and that sheer scale of his Dark Materials. I mean, I wouldn't surprise me if Rusty actually got Michael Giacchino, who did Rogue One and Spider-Man films, to actually score the series himself. But that would be interesting, pipe dream. But yeah, I feel like he'll do something similar to his own era in that ethos of having adventurousness to it, because in his own era, that music kind of scaled up in swashbucklingness, I like to call it.
Yeah.
But you can tell that in the theme. The series 4 theme was markedly different to the 1 to 3 theme, because
with the electric guitar and everything.
So much more energetic. It was like pom pom pom. Instead of focusing on, like, the original version of the Murray Gold theme was more traditional in the sense that it was more reflective of the original theme in 1963.
Yeah, it was the Ron Grain, the Tom Baker theme with a bit of orchestration over the top.
Yeah, it was actually in the track, wasn't it? The original song was underneath that track.
It's like, if you try and replay that, you're either going to have to be as good as Peter Howell, or you're just going to end up with a Dominic Glynn. But no, it's like David Tennant's one sort of ramped up and got more and more. They started dropping away the original music, say they put more guitar in it, more orchestra in it, and it really did. And I think that kind of, if they give the same treatment to whatever the new theme is going to be, like Dominic said, if he's got the cinematic scale of his Dark Materials, it's finally going to be competing with the big American shows. And I think that's going to be on Russell, Julie, and Jane's minds first and foremost. Is right. Let's show the big American shows like Foundation that's just come out, and a few other shows. These huge sweeping sci-fi epics that look very cinematic. They're going to be like, right, let's just show them Doctor Who is not, a tiny, cardboard set thing. Let's show them we can really churn out something of good quality. So that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Well, that's the thing, is that things have moved on. When you think about the landscape of television when Doctor Who came back, certainly in Britain, it was a pioneer in finally convincing production companies like the BBC, like ITV, that actually you don't have to do endless cop murder dramas to make something quality. You can make sci-fi, and then we got a lot of different things, Misfits and
things like Primeval
and all these kinds of things, Merlin, and now with the so-called prestige television, that's the next step, isn't it, of saying now we're not comparing it against I don't know, like Star Trek The Next Generation or something. We're comparing it against things like Game of Thrones or his Dark Materials, or these things that have literally $100 million budgets, which is the best one in the world. Doctor Who is never going to attract that amount of budget, I don't think, and perhaps actually it shouldn't. But they need to up their game in that sense, and therefore the funding model behind the BBC is not going to support that, is it? Because the BBC by law has to divvy up its budget to appeal to the widest audience possible, and even something that makes a ridiculous amount of money and everyone seems to love it, like Game of Thrones is still technically niche, isn't it? It's a niche audience kind of thing. So,
but of course, why are we? Oh, Russell T Davies is why is he starting on the 60th anniversary? Of course, it's going to
Exactly,
put forth
it's-
something
yeah.
massive.
Yeah,
That's
Something
what I was
to
about
really
to move
show
on
that
to.
Doctor
Yeah.
Who. Yeah,
yeah.
something to show that Doctor Who has got that cinematicness to it in his own vision. It's going to be. I think he's going to do something a bit ridiculous in a good way. In a good way. Just to show that, I guess, make his standpoint, put his foot down, and be like, I'm back. So that is going to be really the template to show what Doctor Who in 2023/24 can do.
I tell you what, I'd dearly love to be involved with the TV show in some way. I would not be. I would turn down the offer to write the 60th.
Yeah.
Oh my
No,
goodness.
I'm not touching.
That's a
Big,
poison chalice, isn't it? I mean, Moffat nearly handed the towel in when he had to write one. And when he first started writing it, they hadn't even got the contract sorted for Matt Smith, let alone David Tennant. The only cast member he had, wasn't it, was
Jenna Coleman.
was Jenna Coleman. So he actually did a brief draft, didn't he, where it was just her. And we would have got some sort of extended, you know, the bit from the end of the day, from the
name of the Doctor. Yeah.
The name of the Doctor. There's so many of the Doctors in that.
I know.
Where she's just sort of wandering around through the different time zones of the Doctor. We might have ended up with something like that, you know.
Which probably would have went down like a cup of cold sick.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, you can imagine the reaction to what we did get with Day of the Doctor at the end, with all the photoshopped Doctors' faces on the bodies.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been a whole episode of that, basically, wouldn't it? Potentially.
I do wonder.
Deep fake of the Doctor.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I don't think necessarily. I mean, everyone's like, well, it's going to obviously be a multi-Doctor special. I don't think it should be obviously that. It's become almost like a tradition in the minds of fans in some way. But I remember before Doctor Who came back, the generally accepted consensus within fandom, I believe, was that multi-Doctor stories don't work and you should avoid them. Because I've always loved the Five Doctors. That was one of the first Doctor Who stories that I had, so it has that place. But it is very paint by numbers, and it is a celebration, but it's not really doing anything, is it? It's
not got a merit as a story. It's a merit as nostalgia-filled fun. It's not going to win awards for its craftsmanship of a great narrative.
Exactly,
and I think you can do a 60th, or every time 10 years passes, you can do a big show. And it doesn't have to involve every Doctor possible, as long as it's got some kind of a little bit of that. Let's look back at what's come before, and you know, it doesn't have to be the Monster of the Week for once. It can just be a very epic scale. And you know, like I say, hats off to Russell T Davies. Every time he does a finale of a series, it's pretty epic. Any one of those finales would have been great for a centenary, but who knows, you know.
Yeah.
Well, for me personally, the most moving moment in Day of the Doctor is the point when the 11th Doctor actually steps away from the two other Doctors and says to Clara, well, who am I? What is the Doctor? And she says, I think that was, for me, probably the bit that honoured the show the most, when she quotes Terence Dick saying, you know, never cruel or cowardly. That's the ideal of the Doctor that you have to live up to, kind of thing. And I thought that was more a celebration in a way than you know, the having all the kitchen sink and even having Christopher Eccleston back or something would have been.
At the time, Moffat said something along the lines of an anniversary should be a celebration, but it should also look to the future. You can't just celebrate the past, otherwise it just makes the next episode, where do you go from there, type thing. And I think he succeeded with that with Day of the Doctor. I think Russell is smart enough to know that is true to an extent. So I think whatever he does, he's going to set up his whole era with the story as well as look at the past.
Absolutely.
I got a question for all of y'all. How do you think Russell is going to deal with or not deal with a timeless child?
I think Chibnall's probably got some plans regarding that for the maybe not necessarily for this series, but for the specials coming up to wrap it up. But I think that one of the ideas behind that I think a lot of people seem to have missed is the fact that when she discovers this, the fragment of the fugitive Doctor basically says, you know, it doesn't matter doesn't matter who you were, it matters who you are now. And I think that that was a kind of the point that a lot of people missed, in that on the one hand, it was about returning in some way some mystery to the Doctor's character. I think that, like the name of the Doctor, the literal name of the Doctor, it's one of those things that doesn't necessarily have to be answered without, you know, it's about, it was the same reason why back in the late 80s they introduced the idea, they started hinting the whole Cartmel master plan kind of thing, which has since gone down as if they had this like detailed plan that this was going to be revealed, and Lungbarrow, the story, was going to tell you everything. I don't think that actually was what they were going to do, and I don't think John Nathan Turner would have allowed them. It was about that, who are you, you know, in Silver Nemesis. It was about returning the mystery of the character. And that's why I find it weird then people criticize and say, well, it gets rid of the mystery of the character. And I'm thinking, well, no, because we know we saw the Doctor as a child in bed. You know, there's a lot. The mystery had been somewhat eroded even further. So.
Well, it all depends on how Chibnall ends it off, as Richard was saying. So I'm sure we've got something to do, even if it's the plan of what it would have been is probably condensed now due to COVID. So that's why I imagine that this was originally a longer series, but because of all the production things that have now had to happen, those plans have kind of fallen a bit. So it's probably going to be a little bit minimized, but I'm sure we'll still get the gist. As for how Russell will handle it, I don't think he'll really address it. I think he'll be round off in Chibnall's era, and that'll probably be all we really hear of it, because I imagine Russell won't want to carry on from I think maybe I should have rephrased it as how do you think the Timeless Child storyline will be resolved or not resolved, not so much to do with Russell, you know.
Well, personally, I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't necessarily want the Timeless Child element to be resolved. I think it's better left unresolved to some extent. Maybe there's some rich pickings later on that can come in. I think really the thing that needs to be resolved so that we can finally put this to bed is exactly when is the incarnation of the Ruth Doctor from. Because personally I feel, because a lot of people are like, this is why it's broken. And I say, I don't think it does break anything. Not that that massively matters in a 60-year-old TV show that's been made by so many people over the years. I think the important thing is that the argument that people have generally, from what I've heard from the reasonable voices, is that they don't like the idea that there was a being that called itself the Doctor prior to William Hartnell. And the way I interpret it is that there wasn't, that the Doctor started with the William Hartnell incarnation, but that incarnation had a previous life that is comparable to the Doctor's life. I far prefer the idea that the fugitive Doctor is actually, and this causes some canon problems of its own, I prefer to think that and I'm not the only person to say this, I'm sure you've probably heard this theory before, but I prefer to think of her as an unseen incarnation in between Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee. And that in series 6B, which is technically canon, where Troughton was not straight away forced to regenerate, and he was used by the Time Lords, as we saw in the Two Doctors, because he was talking about the Time Lords to Jamie and all that. And in the Five Doctors, he knew that Jamie and Zoe had their memories wiped, which he wouldn't have done. That he is an agent being used by, in the novels, Terence Dick said it was the Celestial Interventions Agency, which is essentially what the Division in Gallifrey is. And that at some point, actually, he regenerated into the Ruth Doctor. They used her as an agent. Then they wiped her memory of the time and the Doctor's memory of whenever Troughton or Ruth he had been her agent, and then they dumped him as John Pertwee on Earth at the start of Spear of Space.
I really like that.
And it's kind of supported by the fact, if you want to get really geeky, if you look at the Ruth TARDIS, obviously it's the TARDIS model they made for Twice Upon a Time, which is the Hartnell Troughton TARDIS model. So that's the problem that a lot of people have, that why is the TARDIS fixed like a police box before that happens in an unearthly child? So the way I can see it is that it must be after then, and so before Whittaker, she doesn't remember her because she's had her memory wiped, as is established. And all the Morbius doctors and the Timeless Children is basically the other from the Cartmel master plan as a previous life, as a perhaps you could say biologically it's the same being, but psychologically it's not the same character because the Doctor doesn't.
I think
remember
half of the
that.
Morbius doctors are Morbius's previous incarnations as well.
Yes, well, that was always the sort of the defense, wasn't it? That they were Morbius's incarnations, and I suppose it never really mattered much, did it? But Philip Hinchcliffe did say that the intention was, and they listed on the call sheet that they were earlier Doctors.
Okay,
because they all got. There was a thing about it in Doctor Who magazine, I think last year. They did a few issues that were very cheekily saying basically how the canon is already broken, pointing it out without being belligerent. And they were saying about the contradictions in Dalek history and things like that, but then they also looked at that and they said on the paperwork, I believe, because they basically got everyone, they got the directors and different designers and producers and stuff to come in and pose as a older Doctor, because at that time it hadn't been fixed that the fourth Doctor was the fourth Doctor, and in fact the implication early on is I think it was in a Troughton story that it wasn't the first time it had happened,
right?
So
I think with the Timeless Child thing, for me, I mean, I'm not a fan of it, but I think the easiest no-brainer way to deal with all that is the Doctor discovers that the Master was just lying. And
that's one way.
It did happen. It did all happen, but it was the Master who was the Timeless Child. And that explains why he hates the Gallifrey and the Time Lords and the Doctor so much. And he's trying to push this guilt onto the Doctor and saying, that was you. And when actually it's the Master. And it's cool because it keeps everything, the story exactly there, apart from the name change. And it adds an extra layer of info to the past of the Master, which, this doesn't have a lot of his history sort of shown. And it still retains, I mean, why would the Master suddenly be nice to go, I better tell you something about the Time Lords and you, rather than go, I can use this to my advantage here. With my Roger Delgado voice. Yes, Doctor, I think I could do some great damage here to you.
Brilliant. I do like the idea of the Master almost being like the Loki of Gallifrey, where his whole past is just like sprung up on him, and it drives him to be even angrier than ever. I really like that revelation. That would be something I'd definitely go with.
Because
I suppose it also fits in a little bit, doesn't it, with the fact that in the end of time, the revelation was that most of his life was as the result of Rassilon and the Time Lords implanting the drums and all that. So this idea that he was a puppet of the Time Lords his entire life and before could also, twist in nicely. Also give some idea, perhaps as well, of how he was to recover from being the John Sim incarnation, turning into.
We assume the Missy incarnation, and then the.
Well, I like to think generally that the current Master, so to speak, is actually from before Missy. Only because I like the arc of Missy becoming good and then being killed by herself. I don't really like the idea of the Master being gone forever as such, but I think it kind of works only if the Master kills himself, that arc. So
I mean, the Master can have any number of incarnations between Sim and Missy anyway, if they want to play that way. So,
and if he is the Timeless Child, you have infinite number of incarnations potentially, which the Master kind of has anyway.
Yes, a new body at last, Doctor.
And the possibility to steal bodies like I did with Tremus.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
The thing that's all I've always wanted that. I mean, this is something that was somewhat explored sometimes in the novel, but the idea of the Master is obviously a contemporary of the Doctor, but the implication very much is, at least when in Deadly Assassin to some extent, is that the Delgado Master is like the last incarnation in his series of generations, and I find that interesting that he must have zoomed through his lives to get to that point. And what were those stories? Which I was a bit,
It's just
I was a
one
bit
episode.
disappointed.
It's the master's bad day. He falls out of bed and bangs his head on something and then
12
regenerates.
times.
Gets up groggy, staggers, falls down the stairs, regenerates again.
Trips over a brick.
It's like the wrong trousers. With
That's a
Wallace
comic
and
relief
Gromit.
one, isn't it? That's
Amazing.
Yeah, it must have been a day like in the Curse of Fatal Death, where he just
Yeah.
keeps electrocuting himself and stuff.
Get on to
Sonny
that big
reaches-
finish. I really want to see that. I want to hear that, yeah.
Well, I'm really surprised that people haven't done pre-Delgado. Well, they have a little bit, haven't they? They did. There was the Big Finish incarnation, wasn't there, by he who shall be not named, because I can't remember his name. And then there was the young boy, the young boy who was in the Masterful. I haven't really kept up with a lot of that, but I did obviously hear that I got the Masterful collection, so I sort of encountered all these and heard Eric Roberts, although not having, say, Drez for the occasion at some point, I think was a bit of an oversight.
No. Would have been nice.
Mhm.
Believe the name you're looking for is Milo Parker in regards to the young master.
Oh, that's right. Yes, the
youngest
younger
master
master.
there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In Masterful,
But the one I couldn't remember the name of as well is he was in the Thin Blue
Oh
Line.
yeah,
back in the
James
day.
he
Dreyfus.
must not be named. Yeah.
James Dreyfus. That's it. Yeah.
What's the guy's name with that?
So he was supposed to be they're both pre-Delgado Masters, aren't they?
Interesting.
But there's scope for more, isn't there?
Oh, well, again, the Master can just... they implanted an infinite unlock for the Master anyway back in the 70s, so you can do anything you like with the Master. He's very much...
Well, they've
Voldemort,
literally
that was the
killed
name.
him off several
Yeah.
times,
Voldemort.
haven't they?
Yeah. I mean, in the Davies
to the point where I think Moffat just sort of gave up and just said no. Like when Missy gets killed at the end of Death in Heaven. And
Yeah,
then
no, she
you've
comes
got
back to
conve-
life.
It doesn't even bother kind of to even
explain it.
suggest
I mean,
a little
did
bit.
they
It just
bother
happens.
Do they bother explaining his survival between Planet of Fire and Mark of the Rani? No.
Well,
they
exactly.
didn't.
Yeah. He literally burns up in front of him,
Yeah.
saying something which everyone has conveniently forgotten about.
How could you do this to your own?
There we go. Oh,
Devious.
I guess we're
But yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more of Sacha Dhawan's Master.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
something I hope he doesn't necessarily. I imagine he'll probably come back at some point in this Whittaker run, but I'd like to see a Master a bit like Anthony Ainley
Yeah.
crossing incarnations,
Yes.
which we haven't really had since John Sim, really. Well, apart from John Sim coming
Ainley,
back
yeah.
in Capaldi as
Yeah.
with the Missy, and that I thought was really interesting because it was great to see a character written by a different writer in that sense. And
It was written very well. I really liked
yeah.
the Master in that story.
yeah.
I think Moffat really did the Master justice in that story particularly. I think it took him a bit of time to get it right. But yeah.
Well, that moment, I mean, obviously you've got the just be kind speech, but I think the bit that isn't always focused on as much as the way that the John Sim Master responds, because it's just so heartbreakingly tragic. It's so callous. And I suppose he could do that because he's got Missy there to feel somewhat moved by it. But then you've got John Sim said, I haven't listened to a word you've said. It's not even...
I like that.
It's not some sort of It's not a contradiction. The other side. It's just I don't care.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
like
just
that.
so tragic.
And I really like that he basically admits to Bill that he did that 10-year waiting or 100-year waiting, whatever it was, as a gag. He didn't care about it.
It's cruel, yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
He's probably the cruelest master. You can't imagine Delgado being so uncivil in that sense, can you?
No. Gentlemanly sword
I
fights.
can imagine Roberts though. I can imagine
Oh,
Roberts doing it.
Yeah. Although
Get
he
me
might get bored
alive.
and just snap her neck.
Yeah,
some
true.
point. But I mean, I think that's something that obviously we've got to look forward to as well, is the fact that we know that Russell T Davies writes character very, very well.
Yeah.
and so we can. I think both Chibnall and Moffat also write decent characters as well, but I think Russell T Davies is the master really of using narrative to explore emotion and relationship. I hope, this is just a personal perspective, I hope the Doctor isn't as flirtatious as the Tennant Doctor, but I think that was more to do with that incarnation and how it developed, and perhaps also somewhat of a response to some people's appreciation of him. But yeah, I'm not being prudish, but I do prefer my Doctor to be a bit more asexual. I think it's a bit more traditional in that sense, or maybe a little bit less snoggy, you know.
Yes, less over.
Because I do find it weird. I do still find it weird and hard to get my head around that. You know, even though he says he's 900 years old, he's probably much older than that.
Yeah.
Going out with a 18, 19-year-old. I still find that a bit odd.
I mean, he's no way is he only 900, because he was 900 in what, the Colin Baker? No, was it? Yeah, it was the Colin Baker.
It's 950 in the Sylvester McCoy era, and then you've got the Paul McGann era, albeit off screen, and then we now know that the War Doctor was around for several hundred years in order to have aged from Jonathan Carley to John Hurt. You know, and then so he's definitely over 1,000 by the time and now the Doctor's over 2,000. Oh, it took 5 million years. Although technically doesn't count because he died every time and got remade. So for him, it was only a day.
Yeah, I think Moffat took the mick out of that by the end. He just found ways to age the Doctor up.
And kill and bring people back to life.
Oh, go on, Tony.
You know these big. We had the big TV show reveal of Peter Capaldi as the Doctor, and there wasn't really one for Jodie apart from the little sort of the trailers.
The trailer, although that did air after the Wimbledon men's final, so that was quite a good slot.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it's got a big crowd there. Do you think they're going to do one of these for the new Doctor, whoever they may be?
You'd hope they make it an event, right?
I mean, it's Russell.
I think the problem isn't it, is that they're going to have to start making it before the specials come out. Exactly. So it's how they handle it, really. I mean, they did something. I found the Capaldi kind of announcement. I mean, that whole live television thing, personally, I found I've never felt the BBC does that very well. I mean, you just think about the after show for the 50th anniversary and the whole, who was it? It was a boy band.
One Direction.
One Direction they got, and the whole link up where it all went, it's just like, it's so cringeworthy. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of hope I liked the more understated sort of reveal of Jodie Whittaker, and it certainly got people talking. But I think that, Russell T Davies knows how to do show, doesn't he? So I think they're going to want to make a big thing of it, but at the same time, they're going to have to balance it, as we've said, if they bother to, with the promotion for the current Doctor. But I imagine they'll do something. It won't just be a photograph in a tabloid, hopefully.
Hopefully not a tweet.
No, my
God. Oh, God.
Well, as you came on to that point about Russell's sort of love for sexualizing the Doctor, let's put it outright. Do you see any other sort of potential downsides to having Russell back in a creative role? Do any of you see any potential downsides? Maybe regression to 10 years ago or anything like that?
No,
I don't think that'll happen for what we've said, but the only downsides I see to the era are my own personal preferences, which I don't think count in the sense of the success of the show. I personally prefer Doctor Who more like the early Moffat era, but that's just my personal preference. The potential. I think if it was anyone, I think if it was Stephen Moffat saying that, though, if Stephen Moffat was coming back in the same position. And I don't mean to insult Moffat, but I think that, and maybe because it's less time has passed, but I don't think we'd see anything different to what we left it with. But I'm excited for Russell T Davies because I think he will do something different to what he does, you know.
He's had massive development as a writer, so I think there's a lot more to look forward to this time round in terms of his increased skill set and his increased production abilities and what he will bring, especially with Bad Wolf, there is a lot that he is going to bring to the new version of the show. And I think even getting Russell T Davies just now is still a coup. Really, even if, for example, he didn't do, in a hypothetical, he didn't do the original revival, getting him as a new showrunner would have been massive.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely insane.
Now, looking into the future in my stainless steel ball, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen online. Oh,
there seems to be activating it.
That's great. I need to make some of them. Russell T Davies gets his 60th out the way, and guess what? The fandom's going to be divided. I mean, they are with every Doctor that comes. You know, when Matt Smith was announced, everyone said, "Oh, we hate him. We love Tennant so much. We hate him. He's the ugliest Doctor ever." By the time he did one series, best Doctor ever. He's my Doctor, and it happens with every single Doctor. People forget that at the end of Russell T Davies's first run, as showrunner, people were calling for his firing. Get rid of him. Let's bring someone in like Stephen Moffat. And you know what happened to Moffat? Get rid of him. Get shot of him. Get Chibnall in. Get Toby. Get everyone in, and it's going to be the same. They're going to love Russell T Davies when he arrives. They're going to call for his firing at the end of it. They're going to call someone else, and it just goes round and round.
Yeah,
well, I know of people that say the show went downhill in 1963. So it's as soon as Verity Lambert moved on in 1964, that was it. Or when William Hartnell. I think you're always going to get that voice, and I think that a lot of online discussion generally is not so.
Didn't he? He was like, "Oh, little green men,
no bug-eyed monsters."
Oh,
yeah, exactly. yeah. Incidentally, who, when brought in to consult on how to revive the show in the 80s, suggested that they cast a female Doctor. So he's quite visionary in that sense.
He said he was up for that, wouldn't he? He said he
was and Troughton originally said as well that he wanted that.
Because Tom Baker said they should
the talking cabbage only as a companion.
Sidekick, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they had a talking penguin once, so why not?
I'd love to see Frobisher, but
please.
I think there's always going to be that detractor, because you mentioned a few people earlier, and I don't know if I want to do them a disservice. I don't think I care, to be honest. But that discourse, if you want to call it that, it's not about the content. It's not the subject. No. It's the emotion. It's about hate. And it's about channeling that hate into something.
Of bile, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah.
While I agree with a lot of some of those comments, I don't disagree with a lot of the stuff they do. It gets very tiring, and I'd rather hear these people just go on about stuff they love rather than stuff they hate, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll put that energy somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I've always said this before. I said this when the Chibnall era was incoming and people were concerned and things like that. And I said, and it seems very glib of me to say, very easy for me to say, that if I don't enjoy it, I won't watch it. But I mean that. If it's not for me, then I won't watch it. I won't excoriate it. I have a exactly.
I watch it to decide whether you like it or not.
And I say that as someone who obviously is known now online in a small way for talking about Doctor Who and analysing minutiae. And I'm not going, if the new era comes in and I don't like it at all, I wouldn't necessarily spend loads of time making a video critiquing it. I don't think that would be necessary. How is that going to help? I don't think that's going to happen anyway. But and Doctor Who, as I'm sure it is for all of us, is such a massive part of my life. It's very easy for me to feel like I know best and be entitled and have some sort of sense of ownership over it. But I don't own it. If it comes out and it's successful, but it's something that I don't like, then the people who enjoy it are more than welcome to enjoy it, because I wish that they get the same kind of enjoyment that I have out of the things that did appeal to me over time.
Exactly. I mean, it's just simple, really, to me. If I don't like it, I don't like it, but I don't want to lose any friendships over it. I'm more than happy for people to just, enjoy it. It's perfectly reasonable, to be honest. If you don't like something, then don't ruin anybody else's enjoyment, really.
But then those people wouldn't have viewership and they wouldn't have something to talk about on their channel. Their platform consists of hate. This might
Their
seem like
platform is
such
to
a
be used.
cynical- yeah.
Their platform is to be used whatever way they desire.
Yeah.
It all depends on how people interact with it, really. And
Yeah.
you don't have to interact with it. Sometimes you do want to interact with it. Some people do want to go out and call it out.
Yeah.
Do whatever, but don't get yourself hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I do Tuesday videos and I just talk about nonsense basically and show what I'm building and stuff. But I'm not a big lover of the Jodie Whittaker era. I could have done videos for the last couple of years just completely slagging her off and slagging the whole thing. And I'm just like, nah, let you know, people love it. Let them get on with it.
Yeah.
Let
Good
people
for you.
live.
Enjoy it.
I think the thing is, the bit that can be depressing if you let it get to is the ad hominem attack of once you've chosen a side, that is therefore justified to personally attack someone. And I'm very fortunate, I suppose, being what I am as someone who is not of a minority and a man and of a certain age, that I fortunately do not experience the kind of discrimination and prejudice that perhaps other people have, or I know that they have. But I do from time to time have to deal with that kind of nonsense, and sometimes I don't bother to deal with it. I just go on your way. People claiming that I couldn't possibly be happy in my marriage with my wife because men and women are inherently unequal. This kind of nonsense. And I thought, I'm not going to convince you otherwise, am I? So let's just call it a day there. It's knowing when. There's a healthy discussion and disagreement, and as you say, Joe, you don't like the Whittaker era perhaps as much as me. I know from our brief discussion today that I could discuss that with you, and we wouldn't end up stabbing each other at the end of it. And it's knowing when someone's arguing in good faith or bad faith. That's really the decision, isn't it, that we need to make?
Oh no.
That looks like a very specialist tool.
It's a dental tool, in fact. It's I use it for sculpting. But it's like a little spear, isn't it? It's great.
So I would absolutely love to just give you guys a platform to promote your own channels, promote what you've got coming up, and your other social medias, what you can find, etc.
Go.
Okay, I'll go first then. So I am CleverDickFilms. I don't incidentally like being called Dick, but I thought I'd call myself CleverDickFilms.
My middle name's Richard, and I get that a lot.
Well, what I find interesting, and as a teacher as well, a few children have discovered my channel and thought it's really naughty because people don't realise that Dick is short for Richard. But anyway, so I'm CleverDickFilms on YouTube, on Twitter, Facebook, all that business. So check it out. I do very long and waffly videos about the history of Doctor Who and the production, and a little bit of biographical content as well as how I enjoy the show. Well, I always have my main series. I do an era, each Doctor's era, and the one coming up will be the Matt Smith era, which is kind of hotly anticipated. But that's a little bit of a way off. I've still got to do quite a lot of research. It's kind of difficult sometimes, and this kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about how it's difficult sometimes to find out information about the current eras that isn't just the 100%. PR spin. I don't really want to do gossip as such. That's not what my channel's about. But I like to try and find what's really going on. So it sometimes takes a while to get that info out. But I suppose the next video that will be coming up, hopefully very soon, will be I took a little trip to Wales in the summer, and I visited a few filming locations.
Didn't visit? Dude.
I will next time. Sorry.
You walked straight past me in the street, didn't know who you were.
Well, we were in where were we? Monmouthshire.
Okay, bit of a trek from me.
I went to St Fagan's Natural History Museum, where they filmed a lot of the Family of Blood.
Yes.
Nice.
So
I used to work right around the corner from there, so I know it well. Yeah.
Oh right. Oh, it's a lovely little place. So that's my upcoming video anyway.
Fantastic. And Dom, would you like to? You've got a lot going on, so get the floor.
Okie dokie. So I run my channel, which is called Who Chaser. On there, I have a whole guide of how to cosplay the Doctor on various incarnations and all sorts. So that is all perfectly available. Trying to remake that bit by bit because, as happens with the passage of time, things tend to not be able to be available anymore. A lot of places that used to sell Doctor's costumes have either lost the license, just gone defunct, which is a shame. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for people to get access to those outfits again. So I'm going to try and rectify that. As well as that, I do fan audios. So I have my main audio series that is Doctor Who Remnants, and that is currently on my channel as a full series, all up, all 7 episodes, and I'm working on a Halloween special as well, so that's going to be fun. Also, next on the list, I am the Purple Doctor with the DW 2012 fan film series. So recently we've released our Series 5 trailer, which is on the DW 2012 YouTube channel, and we'll be hoping to release the first episode of the series remade at the end of this year, early next year, and with the new series following through that. So yeah, that is going to be upcoming. We're looking forward to getting that out. The trailer's gone down ridiculously well, which I'm extremely humbled by. And yeah, so that is what I've basically got coming up. That's all me done.
Amazing. I can't wait to see all of this stuff as well. You've got so much going on.
And I should probably plug that the Peladon box set is coming out in January as well.
Oh,
with Big Finish.
Saw that the other day on Twitter, yeah.
That has been my first assistant producing job, which has been extremely exciting.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you very
congrats.
much. It's still pinch myself every day to be working with the company that I've loved for so long. So it's really, really awesome. And they're also so lovely people. They're so lovely.
I can imagine. And Terry?
Right then. So at the moment, I'm currently playing the Master for Black Glove Studios, the Delgado Master. I've done the 7-part, the final game, which is on YouTube and has been for a while. We've also recorded 3 other stories: the Broken Sky, the Wounded Earth, and the Shards of Mondas, which I'm currently recording. I'm also playing Bruce Wayne and Batman for CP Studios' World's Greatest Detective. And I beat loads of American auditionees for that.
Can you give a sample of a voice?
They were all doing Christian Bale, and I did Kevin Conroy, so I win.
Nice.
Yeah. So Twitter, Terrence R. Cooper, and my YouTube is TerryOnTuesday. And I'm just finishing my first feature film, Offworld, which is on Facebook at the moment. That will be finished soon and sent to the States. And I'm going to drop very big news on Halloween about the next big thing.
Ooh. Mysterious. I like it. But can I just say thank you so much, guys, for all coming on, taking your time out of your day to discuss such.
You're very welcome.
A pressing issue, I guess. Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
See you all in a bit.
And lovely to meet you all.
Yes, a massive pleasure.
Indeed.
Absolute pleasure, guys. Bye-bye.